On the morning of August 28, 2008, Kanika Powell, a 28-year-old laboratory employee with top-secret security clearance, left her apartment in Laurel, Maryland to run errands. She had spent the past 5 days on edge after 3 different men, one posing as an FBI agent and 2 claiming to be delivery drivers, knocked on her door, each asking for her by name. Just before noon on the 28th, Kanika returned home, and moments later she was ambushed outside her apartment and shot multiple times. Despite years of investigation, her killer has never been identified, leaving many unanswered questions. Was Kanika targeted because of her top-secret security clearance, or was there something more sinister at play? Hey everyone, welcome back to Detective Perspective. My name is Derrick Levasseur. I'm a licensed private investigator and former police detective. Each week I'll be covering an unsolved case in story format. I'll then give you my perspective on the investigation and provide contact information for the individuals or organizations connected to the case so that if you have any tips, you can contact them directly and maybe you can help solve a case. So if you're someone who's interested in true crime, specifically unsolved cases, and you would like to hear my opinion on those investigations, please consider subscribing whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use. Okay, so a couple quick house cleaning things before I dive into the episode. I know some of you don't like it, so you can fast forward 30 seconds if you really need to, but I want to thank everyone who supported me on Traders. It was a great experience, and I know from just reading the comments and DMs that there are a bunch of new people who found Detective Perspective because of Traders, and that's really why I wanted to do the show, so you don't know how happy that makes me. So welcome to what we're trying to do here. I hope you stick around for the long haul because we have a lot to accomplish. Which leads me to why we're here today, Kanika Powell. This is a fascinating case. I'm very surprised I'd never heard of it before. I know this is probably one that a lot of people who believe in government corruption are going to be all over this, because when you look at it on the surface, even just from the teaser, it does appear that Kanika might have been involved in something or may have had knowledge of something that government entities were concerned about getting out, and maybe they decided to take things into their own hands. There's also some other theories that have been thrown out on Reddit, and normally I won't go into the rumor mill, but they've kind of gained some traction over the years, so I want to at least talk about them because after looking into it myself, I do believe they're potentially viable. But we do have a lot to cover tonight, specifically the 3 encounters prior to Kanika's murder. It's really fascinating because sometimes I read them and I think, okay, definitely a contract hit. And then sometimes I read it and I think, this appears to be the work of a novice because they essentially expose themselves before killing her. But I don't want to push a narrative on you. I'm going to relay the facts and see where you fall on it. So without wasting any more time, let's dive into this week's case. Kanika Powell was born on January 31st, 1980 to her mother, Judy. According to Unsolved Mysteries, Judy chose the name Kanika because it meant black cloth and was sacred. She described her daughter as feisty and ambitious, qualities that ultimately led Kanika to enlist in the Army 2 years after graduating from high school. During her final year in the Army, Kanika was stationed in Korea. When she returned home in 2004, she began working at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, which is just outside of DC. For 2 years, she worked as a contract employee before being hired full-time in 2006. Now, we don't actually know what job Kanika was doing at the laboratory. Due to the nature of her work, specific details have never been disclosed publicly. A spokesman for Johns Hopkins told the Washington Post that he couldn't confirm her exact job title or which lab she worked in. However, we do know that she had top-secret security clearance and that the Applied Physics Laboratory was known for conducting more than 400 research projects related to homeland security and other classified areas. Kanika's mother, Judy, later told the Washington Post that Kanika never spoke about her work. Occasionally, she would leave town for a few days to pick up supplies for the lab, but she kept the details to herself. Judy said, quote, "I would ask her where she was going, and she would say, 'Mom, you know I can't tell you that.'" Given her clearance level and military training, Kanika was quick to notice when something seemed off and potentially dangerous. And on Saturday, August 23, 2008, something was definitely off. That evening, around 7 p.m., an unknown man knocked on Kanika's apartment door located at Deerfield Run on Merrill Lane in Laurel. He identified himself as an FBI agent, claiming he needed to speak with her about a fraud case. He flashed a badge, but when Kanika asked for a photo ID, he failed to produce one. So rightfully so, she refused to open the door and the man walked off. Right away, Kanika took steps to document what happened. And according to the Washington Post, she called 911 and the police arrived within 4 minutes. Kanika gave a description of the so-called FBI agent. He was a black male, dressed in all black, black hat, black glasses, and a black North Face jacket. Officers then canvassed Kanika's apartment complex, but found no one matching the description she had given. Kanika also called her local FBI office, and the agents there confirmed that there was no open investigation under her name. They also assured her that a real FBI agent wouldn't have shown up alone, and they would have left behind a card for a follow-up appointment. And this is something I can confirm. I've seen this multiple times. The FBI agents always travel in pairs. That's for numerous reasons. Obviously, officer safety, but also a secondary person to document the encounter in case anything happens. And you see it a lot with like videos that are out there on TikTok and YouTube where the actual FBI will show up and there's always a secondary person. They may not be speaking, but they're there in the background. Now, after speaking with the FBI, Kanika then contacted her leasing office to let them know what was going on. Judy later told Crime Watch Daily that her daughter was so alarmed by the encounter that she didn't just stop at making reports, she also made sure to warn the people in her life. 2 days later, on Monday, August 25th at 8:04 a.m., Kanika sent the following email. The subject line was just one word: weekend. In the email, she wrote, quote, "I just wanted to share with you the most scariest thing that happened to me this weekend. Saturday evening around 7 p.m., a man was knocking at my door. As all of you may know, I live alone. I asked who it was and he didn't answer. So once I got close to the door and looked out the peephole, I saw a male figure that was not familiar to me at all. I asked who he was and all he stated was that he was from the FBI and that he was looking for Kanika Powell. It freaked me out completely because this man knew my name. He held a shield up but no picture ID and he never gave his name. He told me he was looking for me in regards to an investigation. I told him that I had no idea what he was talking about and that he would need to show me documentation as well as a warrant of some sort. So he left and I looked out my bedroom window and saw him walking. I also heard a voice tell him to walk in the opposite direction. The whole situation was scary and seemed so false. So because of this incident, not only did I get no sleep for the rest of this weekend, I'm trying to get an alarm system installed in my apartment. I had one in my old apartment, but I just hadn't had it transferred over to my new one. As far as everything that happened with the guy, I did call the FBI and they told me that it was more than likely bogus because they never come to your door by themselves and they always leave a card of some sort so that you can contact them. I called the local police as well to give them a description just in case someone is out there trying to rape or harm single women. She ended the email by saying, quote, "Pass this on, ladies. This is not a fake forward. This happened to me, Kanika. Who knows who these guys are and what they are doing and what areas other than mine." She then signed the email with her name and added, quote, "Special Security 13-S448JHU/APL. Okay, I know I just threw a bunch of information at you, so let's break it down. This isn't the first time we've heard something like this happening where you have an offender impersonating a law enforcement officer. It could be a local police officer, could be an FBI agent. In many cases, it's actually easier to impersonate a federal agent because in many instances, they don't wear a full official uniform. They may just have khakis and a polo on. And yes, anybody can get a badge off the internet these days. And frankly, even a photo ID, that's pretty easy to replicate. So you really don't know who you're speaking to until you get out there, actually talk with them, kind of see the paperwork, maybe look into it a little bit. It really is a risk. And I would say that if law enforcement does come to your door and it doesn't appear to be an urgent matter and it's not completely obvious that they are in fact law enforcement, maybe let them know through the Ring doorbell camera or through the peephole, "Hey, listen, I don't know who you are. Leave your card. Let me know what it's about just through the door, and then I will call you back immediately after I confirm that you are in fact who you say you are." Most agents, most officers are not going to have a problem with that. I know that I wouldn't. And if it's not an urgent matter, I'm going to say, okay, no problem. I'm going to leave my card right here, or I'm going to slide it under the door. You can call the FBI. You can confirm that I am who I say I am and that I'm out at this address investigating this crime. Once you do all that, come outside, flag me down, and I'll come back up to the door. If not, Call me later and I'll come back when I have time. So I have zero problem with the way that Kanika handled this situation, and I would recommend you handle it the same if you ever find yourself in a similar situation. But as far as the actual specifics of this encounter, the fact that he didn't provide a photo ID, the fact that as he walked away, Kanika could hear someone saying, "Hey, walk the opposite direction." There was clearly an accomplice there who didn't want to be seen at the front door, and this absolutely appears to be bogus based on all the investigative work that Kanika did. Like I said, she talked to local law enforcement, she talked to the FBI, they had nobody out there. So clearly this person had an ulterior motive, and more than likely it wasn't a good one. And like Judy said, this encounter, it really shook Kanika up. On August 26th, the day after she sent that email, she had lunch with a coworker and confided just how afraid she really was. That coworker later told the Washington Post that Kanika, quote, was busy working on stuff trying to get the police involved. She was really messed up about the whole thing. But as I mentioned in the teaser, that's not where this story ends. In fact, it's just the beginning. Because on the following evening, August 27th, another man knocked on Kanika's apartment door. But this time, he didn't pretend to be law enforcement. Instead, he claimed to be delivering a package, except he wasn't even holding one. According to Medium, the man was dressed in a FedEx uniform, and just like the fake agent, he asked for Kanika by name. When she didn't answer the door, he said he needed to get the package, but no package was ever delivered, and no tag was left behind for Kanika to pick the package up somewhere else. So here we are, 4 days later, we have another guy approaching the door. I'm assuming this is a different individual, but now they're dressed in a FedEx uniform, but they got no package in their hand. And I'm going out on a limb here, but more than likely, this is one of the two guys who showed up on the first occasion, but now they've swapped roles so that, she doesn't immediately identify this person as the same person who is portraying themselves to be an FBI agent. That's my guess. It could be a completely different situation, but it just appears to be too much of a coincidence to me. More than likely, this is the same pair. They've just switched roles. So at some point after the fake FedEx driver left, Kanika told her mom and friends about what had happened. And her mom offered to let her stay at her place, but Kanika refused. As I said earlier, she was feisty and determined, not to mention trained and confident, so she may have felt like she could handle the situation on her own. Besides all of that, she also had plans that she was looking forward to. Medium reported that Kanika was set to attend a Pride event in Atlanta with a woman she had recently started seeing. She had even taken off work on August 28th to get her car serviced and run errands before the 11-hour road trip. So despite the unsettling visits from these mysterious men, she wasn't going to cancel her plans, and she wasn't going anywhere. Then, another knock came. At around 7:30 a.m. on August 28th, Kanika's scheduled day off, another man showed up at her door, claiming to be delivering a package he didn't have with him. Once again, Kanika didn't open the door, and the man left without leaving a package or a delivery tag. After he was gone, Kanika called her mother, and she mentioned how strange it was for someone to attempt a delivery that early in the morning. Judy later told Crime Watch Daily that during their conversation, Kanika said she wanted to get her errands done as soon as possible so she could get home before dark. Looking back, Judy said she could hear the fear in her daughter's voice. Still, Kanika stuck to her plans. She left her apartment to take care of everything she needed to do. But when she returned home just before 11:50 a.m., someone was waiting for her. We're going to talk about that right after the break. Did you know that squirrels are nature's greatest investors? Why? Well, squirrels spend a large chunk of their lives stashing away their acorns. In fact, one squirrel can store over 10,000 nuts each year. They save so many acorns that they have zero idea where most of them are. Okay, now losing track of your assets isn't the best financial strategy, but the next part is pretty great. Those acorns that the squirrel totally forgets about, some of them grow to be oak trees, and as we know, those oak trees produce more acorns, so just like that, the squirrel looks like a complete genius. They are living proof that anyone can be an investor, they just have to give their acorns a chance to grow. Which brings us to today's sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with spare money you've got right now. You don't need a ton of time. You can create your Acorns account and start investing in just 5 minutes. And you don't need to feel like financial wellness is impossible. Acorns gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money on the right track. Basically, Acorns does the hard part so you can give your money a chance to grow. I'm someone who definitely believes in investing for the future, especially because I have children, And I have my money diversified in a couple different things. But what I like about Acorns is it really doesn't take any work or a financial advisor, especially their roundup feature, where essentially once you've accrued $5 in spare change, Acorns will automatically invest it for you. All you have to do is link your debit card to your Acorns account and then just use it like you normally would. And without you even doing anything, you're investing in your future. So sign up now and join over 13 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head over to acorns.com/detective or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/detective. Okay, let's get right back into it. The moment Kanika approached her door, she was ambushed by someone who was standing in the hallway just outside of her door. This person fired multiple times, hitting her in the upper body and head before fleeing the scene. Neighbors immediately called 911, and someone reported hearing Kanika cry out, "No, no, no." Law enforcement arrived within minutes, and Kanika was lying in a pool of blood, still alive, but unconscious with her wallet and keys beside her. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Tragically, Kanika passed away the next day. The Prince George's County Police Department took the lead in investigating Kanika's murder. They started by digging into her life, searching for anyone who might have a motive to kill her, but they came up empty. At the time, Detective Kelly Rogers told the Washington Post, quote, "We haven't ruled out any avenue of investigation or motive other than that it was random." And obviously, I agree with law enforcement here. This wasn't random. You have 3 separate attempts to make physical contact with our victim, Kanika, and in 2 of those 3 occasions, the men knew the victim by name. I don't know about the 3rd one. There was no mention of it, so that's why I left it out. And I also think it's safe to assume, based on what Kanika relayed to her friends and family, that the first 2 male individuals were not the same person. Like I said when we talked about it, it was probably the partners in crime, right? One came up as the FBI agent, and then the other person came up as the FedEx employee. Now, this 3rd individual, we don't know as much about this incident. Like I said, we don't know if they mentioned her by name. I'm assuming they didn't, if they just said they had a package. And we also don't know if this person was one of the first 2 individuals and maybe they just changed their appearance a little bit to throw Kanika off. So we know we have at least 2 individuals, potentially 3, and they all made attempts to talk to her in person. She refused to do so. And I think it's reasonable to assume that if Kanika had opened the door on one of those occasions, the situation would have ended much differently. The only reason she was still alive on the 28th was because she was smart enough not to make that mistake. But eventually, these individuals adjusted their tactics, they waited for Kanika to leave, and they got her on the way back. But absolutely, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this wasn't random, and more than likely these incidents are connected. The question is, who are these people, and why did they do it? And unfortunately, that is pretty much all we know about Kanika's case. Over the last 16 years, law enforcement hasn't provided any further information, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, in that time frame, the public has formed many theories about what could have happened, and 2 of them stuck out the most. The first theory I want to talk about involves an unsolved murder, one that took place less than 3 months after Kanika was killed. On November 12, 2008, a second person with top secret security clearance was gunned down in Prince George's County. That person was 31-year-old Sean Green. Sean was an IT consultant who worked at the National Counterterrorism Center in Virginia. He was also the beloved uncle of 8 nephews and 1 niece, and after graduating from the University of Maryland with a bachelor's degree, he went to work at the center where his contributions were considered vital. So let's break down what happened. On November 12th at 5:30 p.m., Sean left his apartment complex and was traveling from Virginia Lane to St. Barnabas Road when he stopped at a red light. That's when a masked gunman approached his car and started shooting before fleeing on foot. Sean was shot 9 times in the head. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems deliberate, and it doesn't appear that the shooter took anything from the crime scene. No wallet, no keys, no car, just shot Sean and took off. Authorities later told the Washington Post that the murder looked quote-unquote personal, but I would also say it looked professional. At Sean's funeral, a statement was read from the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Along with speaking to Sean's character, and included the words, quote, "Sean understood how his critical work contributed to the success of our mission, and he strove to do his very best each and every day. His important work at this center has helped to keep our country safe. And all these years later, Sean's murder, like Kanika's, remains unsolved. Now, I do want to note that police have never publicly connected the two cases, but there are some similarities. Both victims held top secret security clearance, both were shot at close range, and in both cases, it appeared that the victim was deliberately targeted. Now, I do have questions about this because if I looked more into Sean's case, there may have been something in his personal life that may suggest that something else could have happened here. But without having access to those reports, I really can't do so. But there are a lot of questions in this case. I would want to look into Sean's past. I would want to see what type of enemies he had. What was he involved in? Is there anybody out there that would have a motive to hurt him? As far as the crime scene itself, I would want to know if there was any video surveillance footage. I would want to know if there were any witnesses. I would want to know the caliber of weapon used. I would also like to know the specifics of how he was shot, because I will tell you, being shot in the head is one thing, but how they were shot is also important. Does it appear that the shooter was accurate? Was it a small grouping or was it just random? This may suggest that it was a professional versus a novice. I would want to know if anything was taken from the vehicle. Yes, on the surface, it doesn't seem like that was the case, but again, without the actual report, I cannot confirm that. I would then take all of that information and compare it to Kanika's case. Again, not a lot of things have been released publicly. I would want to know the caliber of weapon in that case. I would want to know the groupings of how she was shot. Again, does it appear to be a professional or just some novice? These are things that we could take if we had access to both cases to come up with a better determination as to whether or not the cases could be connected. But without it, we're just kind of sitting here speculating, and I hate it. Now, I want to talk about the second theory that I found interesting, but before I do, let's take our last break. Millions of Americans grind or clench their teeth at night, and most don't even know they're doing it. If you have jaw pain or headaches after a night's sleep, there's a high probability you grind or clench your teeth. Teeth grinding can be caused by stress, and it can cause serious damage such as eroding away your enamel and broken teeth, which leads to expensive dental bills. The solution to protecting your teeth is a mouth guard, but mouth guards from a dentist can cost you around $500 to $800. The good news is that there's Remy. You've heard me talk about Remy before. I really like the product and I really like the company, and they make dental grade professional quality mouth guards but without the painful price tag. They're up to 80% cheaper than what you'd pay at a dentist, and they don't require you to visit a dental office. Remy's process is extremely simple. They'll send you an at-home impression kit to create molds of your teeth. You send those back to Remy, and then Remy's dental team will make your custom fit guards and send them right back to you. And Remy's guards are extremely comfortable. The last ad that I did, I was actually wearing them while doing the ad, and most of you didn't even notice. So they really take the time to make sure the fit is perfect, and by doing so, after a couple minutes, you forget that you even have them on. Plus, with a 45-night satisfaction guarantee, you can try it risk-free, sleep better, and decide if it's a perfect fit. And if not, Remy's got you covered. And I know I mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning again. I got the opportunity to speak to Oscar, the owner of Remy. He really does stand behind his product, and they pride themselves on customer service. So after having my conversation with him, this was a product I knew I wanted to endorse. Remy is for anyone dealing with nighttime grinding, clenching, or jaw pain who wants an affordable solution to protect their smile and say goodnight to jaw pain and headaches. So head over to shopremy.com/detective and use my code detective to save up to 50%. That's 50% off at shopremi.com/detective with code detective. Give your teeth a break by not breaking the bank with Remy. And thank you to Remy for sponsoring this week's episode. All right, we're back, and I want to talk about this other theory that's been brought up time and time again, and that's the possibility that this was a serial killer. And it's not uncommon for unsolved cases to eventually lean in this direction, often more as a general suspicion rather than a specific person being named. But in Kanika's case, there is a particular name that comes up repeatedly, and that's Jason Scott, also known as the mother-daughter killer, who operated in Prince George's County. Now, in July of 2009, almost a year after Kanika's murder, law enforcement executed a search warrant at Scott's residence. The warrant was tied to a string of 50 burglaries and 9 armed robberies that Scott was being investigated for. According to the Department of Justice, investigators uncovered a range of evidence during the search, including, quote, 16 stolen firearms, a North Face backpack, ski masks, Nike gloves, burglary tools, police radio frequency scanners, computers, computer storage devices, ammunition and holsters, and video and digital cameras. These findings led to Scott facing additional charges, including 5 counts of murder. And in June of 2008, just 2 months before Kanika was murdered, Scott was alleged to have shot and killed 46-year-old Vilma Butler inside her home in Prince George's County. Afterward, he set the house on fire and fled the scene. The police also believe that in January of 2009, Scott killed his first mother-daughter pair, 45-year-old Karen Lofton and 16-year-old Carissa. The two were shot inside their locked home in Largo, and before Carissa succumbed to her injuries, she managed to call 911, but by the time law enforcement arrived, the killer was already gone. Now, in these instances, detectives found no signs of forced entry. However, they discovered an unlocked window, which may have been the killer's way in. Nothing was stolen, and investigators found no fingerprints or DNA left behind. In March of 2009, Scott struck again, just blocks away from Karen and Carissa's house. That day, a woman called 911 to report that her car had been stolen. 15 minutes later, the police found the vehicle parked in a stranger's driveway set on fire. Inside, they discovered the bodies of 42-year-old Dolores DeWitt and her 20-year-old daughter, Ebony. Both women had been strangled. Now, the backstory here is that Dolores and Ebony were neighbors of the woman whose car had been stolen, and when police searched their home, they found an unsecured window there as well, just like they found at Karen and Carissa's home. They also discovered bleach stains in the bedroom and blood in the DeWitt car, suggesting the woman had been attacked while they were still in their home, just like the other victims. Now, in 2013, Scott entered an Alford plea for the murders of Dolores and Ebony. As part of the deal, the other 3 murders were taken off the table, and he was sentenced to 85 years. Now, some of you may be saying, oh, that's long, he's going to be dead before he gets out. But what about those other victims? Do you think their families were okay with that? Do you think their families were okay with the fact that this person didn't have to publicly acknowledge what they had done to them? Again, I guess it's a different story for a different day, but I don't love it. But as far as these cases are concerned and how they tie in with everything, you probably are wondering, why do the people out there believe that Scott may have been involved in Kanika's murder? And there are a couple reasons, and I'll give them to you, and then I'll give you my opinions. But the most prominent 2 that I hear is that, first off, Kanika and Scott attended the same high school. And the second is that in 3 of the 5 murders that Scott was suspected of, a gun was used, just like in Kanika's case. But it's important to note that in all these cases, the guns have never been recovered. So how can you really make that comparison? There is one other detail that some believe could connect Scott to Kanika's murder, and that's that when Scott was investigated by law enforcement, they learned that he had worked at UPS and would use that position to research victims, not just in the burglaries, but in at least one of the murders as well. But again, when we go back to all of these things, as you can probably tell from the tone of my voice or my facial expressions, I'm not seeing the correlation here. First off, the delivery driver in Kanika's case used a FedEx uniform, not a UPS uniform. Yes, there were guns used in all cases, but there's guns used in a lot of unsolved cases. And it appears to me that Scott did take some measures to clean up the crime scene after committing said crimes. He would use bleach, he would burn the vehicle, or he would burn the residence. That doesn't appear to be the case here at all. Whoever shot Kanika had one intention and one intention only. They wanted to go up to her, they wanted to kill her, and they wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. They really didn't worry about making sure that the crime scene didn't leave behind any evidence. And the way that they actually carried out the murder, they may have taken some preventative measures to make sure that it couldn't be connected back to them, where in Scott's case, it didn't seem like he did that. It was more after the fact that he would do certain things to try to prevent law enforcement from identifying him. So I'm not seeing the connection, but I do know a lot of people out there believe there could be something. And you know what? If I had more access to the information, specifically Kanika's case, maybe I would agree with them. It is enough for me to cover it here, which is why I'm doing it, but I'm not completely sold on it. And another little piece of information that I wanted to mention, which kind of goes back to what I just said a couple minutes ago, is that after Scott entered the Alford plea for the 2 murders, Prince George's County homicide detective Tony Schratner told the Washington Post that this wasn't the outcome he had hoped for. He stated, quote, "My curiosity in wanting to know the story and the events and why he did certain things aren't answered." And I completely agree with him here. As well as not getting justice for the other victims, you're left with more questions than answers. By going under this Alford plea, Scott essentially gets to say, I'm guilty, but still claim his innocence. And so if he's claiming his innocence, he's not going to admit to the specifics of what he did because in his mind, he's still innocent. So the detectives that are working this case and other cases that may be connected, they're really left with nothing. That is one of the benefits that you get from a trial. You get to learn about the MO and how they carried out their operations, and then you can cross-reference that with other unsolved cases. With an Alford plea, you get none of it. So completely agree with him here. And if I had to read between the lines, he's basically throwing an FU to the prosecution by saying, you took this deal just to get the conviction, and now I'm left with my hands in my pockets. Thanks a lot. And as a final note, I will say that at this point, at least publicly, it's unclear whether or not Scott was ever questioned about Kanika Powell's murder. What is clear is that more than 16 years later, Kanika's killer remains unidentified. Her family and friends are still desperate for answers, and community members are left wondering what is going on in Prince George's County. Okay, let's dive into this perspective and elaborate on some of the things that I said during the episode. And I did go into a lot of detail about my opinions on certain parts of this case. So this won't be too lengthy, but just some things I want to kind of put a pin in. First off, very clear to me, this was not a robbery, right? As I mentioned, her wallet was left right beside her. Clearly, the motive wasn't financial in nature. This was a targeted attack. They specifically wanted to kill Kanika, and they made multiple attempts to do so. The question becomes, why? Why did they want to kill her? What was going on in her life, whether it was personal or professional, where someone felt that they needed to remove her from this earth? If it's professional in nature, we'll probably never have those answers. If she was involved in something at her workplace, which is why she needed that top secret security clearance, we're never going to find those answers. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I think most of you have probably already come to that conclusion. She may have been involved in something professionally, maybe even deeper than we know, maybe more than just lab work. There are people that go undercover that do other things that they can't talk about. And if she was one of those people, that's classified information and maybe information that Prince George's County doesn't even have at this point, and they never will. On another side of things, you also still have to consider that it was personal in nature. I know that I said they didn't find anything that would suggest there was a person out there who would want to hurt Kanika, but just because they didn't find anything doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's the problem here. You can do as good as you can as far as looking into the background, but maybe there was something from her past that came back and there's not a direct correlation. There's not a direct connection. Kanika may not have even known why this was happening. It could have been something from years ago that she's forgotten about and thought it was a non-issue, but it's come back to haunt her and she's not even aware of it. We also have to acknowledge that if this is connected to the previous encounters and they're not just coincidences, and I don't think that they are, a professional hitman making 3 attempts, really poor attempts, to contact their target directly in this manner does not appear to be professional. It appears not to be well thought out. If they had done some background work, they probably would have found out that Kanika was smart and in this field. So if they tried to approach her as an FBI agent, more than likely she wasn't going to open the door. They would have known that if they really knew Kanika. Secondly, making another attempt only 4 days later, but this time as a FedEx worker without a package. That seems, again, that there was a lack of preparation going into this and it was kind of spontaneous. And then just the sloppiness of it, the fact that Kanika could hear someone else in the background saying, hey, go the opposite direction. Does that sound like a professional to you? So I go back and forth on it. I really do. When I go through it in my head and as I'm writing my notes initially, I'm thinking definitely a professional hit. They had access to uniforms, they made multiple attempts. They at least took some measures to try to present themselves as something they weren't. But then on the other hand, it sounds sloppy and it sounds like someone who maybe got a uniform off eBay and a badge from some website and just brought it with them. That could be the case here as well. We don't want to just get ourselves focused in on the fact that this is a government hit and more than likely we'll never find the answer. It's very possible that this is some Joe Schmo who saw her in the area, maybe knew her, but doesn't have any previous connections, and for some reason had an axe to grind with her. It could be something so trivial as thinking she was involved in someone they cared about, or her being in a relationship with someone who may have just gotten out of another relationship. I'm trying to say that there's maybe a connection here that no one in law enforcement is going to be able to tie back to Kanika, because it may tie back to someone else in Kanika's life. This person that she was currently dating, that she was going to Atlanta with, what was their background history like? Who were they involved with? Did they have any issues? Was there anybody else that Kanika was involved in? Is there anybody else that may have been involved with a particular group of people or a person who may be unstable, who may have seen that Kanika was hanging out with someone that they had feelings for and decided to go at Kanika instead of the person that they were involved with? There's so many variables here, and without having access to the reports directly, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Questions that I don't even know if the law enforcement agency investigating it have the answers to. And that's why I think at this point, especially after 16 years, we talked about it in the last case, you need to allow a new set of eyes to look at this investigation, whether that's another law enforcement entity or a licensed private investigator. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Bring someone in, have them sign an NDA, get an MOU, a memorandum of understanding in place, where that person comes in, looks at the case with a fresh set of eyes, and sees if there's something that maybe you missed. And what would they be looking for? Well, there's a couple things. I'm hoping that on the day of Kanika's murder, most of the vehicles in that apartment complex, all the registration plates were written down. You want to go through each registration plate and make sure that every vehicle belonged to that location. You also want to review all the witness statements taken from that day. Again, on the surface, there may not have been nothing to the first investigator looking at the case, but with someone else taking a look at it and just stepping back from 35,000 feet, they may find a pattern or a correlation between two statements that lead back to another case that was also being investigated at the same time. And then finally, I would want to look at the list of people who were at that location but may not have spoken at the time. I would also want to relook at any surveillance footage that was captured from that day at the apartment complex, if there is anything, or any of the surrounding areas that was seized at the time of the murder. I'm really hoping, as I sit here right now, that was done. As we've talked about numerous times before, the surveillance footage will be written over after about 7, 14, or 30 days, depending on the DVR. So what you want to do in that case, if you're the acting detective on it, is go to those businesses, grab that footage, make sure that you download it and have it in evidence for as long as the case is going on. And then finally, you want to try to drum up some new leads. Put it on social media, put it on TV, offer a reward, see if there's anybody in the case file who wasn't interviewed the first time around, because that's really what's going to solve this case. Someone coming forward with information that law enforcement didn't have before, which leads me into my recap, because anybody out there who may know something about this case, we need you to come forward. So in saying all of that, 28-year-old veteran Kanika Powell received 3 mysterious knocks at her door starting on August 23, 2008. The first man claimed to be an FBI agent, and the other two, one on the evening of August 27th and another on the morning of August 28th, said they were there to deliver packages, and at least 2 of the men knew Kanika's name, but she refused to let them in. After the final knock, Kanika left her home to run errands, and she returned home around 11:50 a.m. where she was gunned down in the hallway outside her apartment door at the Deerfield Run Apartments in Laurel, Maryland. The killer and the murder weapon have never been found. Anyone with information is asked to call the Prince George's County Police Department at 301-352-1200 or Prince George's County Crime Solvers Hotline at 1-866-411-8477. And as always, my final words go out to Kanika's friends and family, specifically her mother, Judy. I don't know if they'll see or hear this case. I hope they do. And I hope they understand that we're here fighting with them. It's been too long. There should have been more information released at this point. And I hope that maybe with a little public pressure, the law enforcement agency will bring you in and at least give you an update and maybe allow you to see some of the investigation that has transpired and what they really have. If you decide to share that information, it may hurt the case, but that's up to you. You at least have the right to know. And we're here with you. I hope that there's an update sooner than later. I feel like this case is solvable. I don't necessarily think that it's at the level of a government cover-up, which is a good thing, because that means this person or these people are not professionals, which means they most likely made mistakes. We just need that person that has that information to come forward so we can hold them accountable. And I hope that day soon. And if it does come, I'll be right here letting all of you know. But until then, everyone stay safe out there, and I'll see you soon.